Hi everyone, and a warm welcome to this week's episode of the Low Season Traveller Insider Guides. I'm Jed Brown, your host for this week's episode, and today we're heading straight over to Kenya, where I recently provided the keynote talk at the Sustainable Africa Tourism Summit. After a week of meetings, I took the opportunity to visit Tsavo National Park, which is the largest national park in Kenya and also happens to be in its low season right now. Located just a 2-hour drive from Mombasa, Tsavo in the low season months has everything which you would expect to find of a major national park in East Africa, with just one exception: crowds. In this episode, recorded live at Voi Wildlife Lodge in Tsavo East, I talk through my experience of the low season here in Kenya and, as you will hear, got a little too close to the wildlife for my liking in the process. Please forgive some of the wind noises which you hear on this. It was outside and a little bit windy. Enjoy. Hi everyone, and welcome to this very special edition of Low Season Traveller Insider Guides, live from Tsavo National Park in Kenya. Wanted to record this episode, we're doing this on video as well as audio, I should point out, just to let people know a little bit more about what the low season is like here in Kenya. So first of all, the low season tends to run from end of April through May, June, July and possibly August. The reason that historically it's been the low season is it tends to be the wet season. It tends to be when you get the rains. Now, I will say this: I've been here in Kenya for and the Mombasa region, broadly speaking. I've been here for a week now, and I can say that I haven't seen any rain. I think it has rained on an evening, occasionally, maybe when I've been in bed at night, but I haven't seen any rain at all during the day. It's very pleasant during the day. The sun shines. It's very warm. And it's warm at night, I will say that as well. But certainly the rain certainly hasn't stopped the enjoyment of what we've seen. I've been down on the coast at Mombasa. I stayed for a couple of nights in the Tsavo Lodge, which again you can find on TripAdvisor and all of those other websites. And that's a lovely property right there by the beach. And a great place to, relax, I suppose, and have a bit of a beach holiday. One of the advantages of staying in the Mombasa region, broadly speaking, is you're not too far away from Tsavo National Park. Tsavo National Park is the largest national park in Kenya, and it's split into two. You have Tsavo East and Tsavo West. It's about a 2-hour drive from Mombasa and from the coast resorts, so it's very, very accessible. And it makes it a great location. Sorry, can you hear the baboons in the background? I don't know if you can see the baboons behind me. A troop just came in before. But broadly speaking, it's a great destination if you're looking to have a little bit of a beach break and also to have a safari experience. Then, I would argue there's nowhere better than Kenya, and especially during the low season months where we know it doesn't affect anything. The wildlife is still here. One thing I will say as well that struck me about this particular trip is its affordability. I was staying in Mombasa for a few nights. I also went to Kilifi, and I've done a separate podcast on the Climate Friendly Travel podcast that I also host. And that was a resort called Distant Relatives, which is a fabulous, fabulous spot. It's in a place called Kilifi. That's Kilifi. Can you hear them? They're making a right racket, these baboons behind me. And in Kilifi, there's a kind of a creek. It's a little bit inland, but there's a creek there with a beach, which is beautiful. And it's not a creek. When we talk about a creek being one which you might imagine as being quite narrow, this is something like 25 miles in total. So it's pretty large. It's got a beautiful beach there, and that place, Distant Relatives Backpackers. Please do Google it. We're going to feature it on lowseasontraveller.com in the near future as well. Super environmentally friendly. Everything they do is recycled. All the water is recycled. the sewage, you name it. They do absolutely everything, and it's just a wonderful, chilled out place to be. And again, during the low season, there was only a handful of people there. It was just very relaxed. One of the things I will say about that particular place in Kilifi is when you're at Distant Backpackers, you're in among all of the foliage, and there's monkeys in the trees and all kinds of wildlife around. But one of the things that you can do is you can walk. It's about 15 minutes through through trees and along sort of sandy kind of paths until you get to that beach just near the creek, which is a gorgeous beach. And one of the reasons that I love that particular beach is that there's nothing there. Nothing's been built on it. There are no buildings around anywhere actually. Just there. It's just completely natural. But when you go at the right time, and the preferable time is the time when it's the black moon, when it's darker and there isn't a full moon. At night time, it's one of those few places on Earth that has bioluminescence. And if you haven't experienced this, it blew my mind. I will absolutely say that. I'd heard of bioluminescence in the water before, and I'd heard that it was in a few places around the world, but I'd never experienced it for myself. And what I experienced the night before last, it way surpassed anything that I've ever encountered. And just to put that in perspective, I've seen the Northern Lights, and anybody else that's seen the Northern Lights out there, that's a wonderful experience. It's never quite the same as the images that you see that are taken of the Northern Lights, because they're done with a really slow shutter speed and everything else, but still it's quite impressive, and that was definitely one of the impressive things that I've seen in the past. This bioluminescence actually is way better than any photographs or videos that I've ever seen of it. As soon as you jump into the water, which is lovely and warm even in the low season, as soon as you move your arms around or your legs around, the whole water glows. You can see these tiny little plankton. You can see the individuals as well. They're not that microscopic. And you see them glow as you move around. And it's just, it's magical. It's like swimming in fairy dust. It's one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had in my life. And I was speaking to a guy from South Africa. James, if you're out there, how are you? Good to speak to you. James was telling me that he's seen bioluminescence before, and he said, I've never seen anything like this. So that's the bioluminescence that you get in Kilifi, which is a wonderful place in its own right. And Distant Backpackers was where I stayed, which has a variety of accommodation. The baboons are just going crazy. So then I came from the sort of the beach where I was sort of Mombasa coast, Kilifi, and then I've come over here now to a place called Voi, and I'm in Voi Wildlife Lodge. So this is in Tsavo East, I think, I'm pretty sure. And I was here just for one night last night. And this is another wonderful spot. So again, a safari experience. To stay at Voi Lodge here for one night cost about £60–70, and that was for full board, so bed, breakfast, lunch, evening meal. The food is great, it's all buffet naturally, but one of the beauties about this place is this is where it is. You've got these water holes here, where over here there's a hippo just sitting in the water. You've got, at the moment, a troop of baboons has come past. Usually in the afternoon, you get a whole load of elephants coming through. We saw, there was about 6 or 7 giraffe that came by yesterday. All manner of creatures just rock up to the watering hole to get their water and to bathe. And you get to see it all. You don't need to go out and do a drive. Now, you can of course go out and do a drive, and I would love to do a drive, but it's a little bit out of my budget at the moment. I'm trying to do this very much on a budget because I'm here on business, and I'm here mainly for other purposes. If I was on vacation, possibly I would spend the money and go on a safari drive. Don't know what's going on over there. The safari drive, you have to pay $50 a day to get into the park, into Tsavo, so you get that park permit. And then on top of that, you have to pay for the safari vehicle and the ride. It costs about £70 for a safari drive. They tend to go out first thing in the morning, 5–6 in the morning, which is again when you have the best chance of seeing more creatures. And then in the evening as well, they also go out. I would have done it on my own, but I would have to have paid the full amount on my own. If you go with 4 or 5 of you, then you split that cost between 4 or 5 of you, which is better. But so that's possibly a disadvantage of the low season. Like I say, we are here in the low season. This place has got so many rooms, all overlooking the watering hole. I've seen, I would say maybe 10, 15 people in total. So it's very, very quiet. And you get a great spot just in front of the watering hole, nice and easy. But on the downside, if you're looking to share that cost of a safari drive with others, there's less of a possibility for that. So that's where we are for this particular episode. I'm here for another 5 or 6 hours. Holy Lord, there's a baboon just on its way, and I'm getting a bit nervous now. How the heck? I'm going to turn this around and show you. Oh, how do I do that? I can't turn it around. Okay, baboon, easy. Holy Lord. It's a bit disconcerting. I'm just putting all of my equipment away in the bag. Gosh, you might have a baboon attack live. Can you see just behind? Hold on. Can you see it just behind me there? And he's just sitting down, chilling. Is he going over the edge? He's going over the other side. Okay. That was a little bit scary, if I'm being very honest. The wildlife guy's just on his way now as well. Off he goes. Yeah, okay, that was a bit nerve-wracking. So there you go. It all happens when you're doing a live podcast, I suppose. That's thrown me because he was quite a big boy. These baboons, they're quite large, and they can be quite vicious. And I think it's quite unusual that they come in. There are a lot of monkeys around. They're quite small monkeys, and they seem relatively friendly. But you need to leave your doors closed on the evening because the monkeys do come in, and typically they're just looking for food. But they do come into the rooms as well. But they're only very small. But it can throw you a bit because look, they're wild animals, so you need to be careful. Baboons are much larger, and I believe they're more vicious. And yeah, that was a bit nerve-wracking. So that's it. That's where we are in Tsavo National Park. Highly recommended. Easy to do on a budget. And by the way, that 2-hour drive from the coast to somewhere like Voi here takes about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Costs in a taxi about 30 quid to get a private taxi. So the costs are really, quite manageable. But what I would say is overall, there are a number of places in Africa where you can have a safari and a wildlife experience. And my picture had always been that it was a very expensive activity to undertake, and what I've learned from being here in Kenya is it really doesn't have to be. You can stay in good quality, if at times a little bit basic, but relatively cheap accommodation both by the coast, and then within 2 hours you're in Tsavo National Park, which is absolutely sensational, and I've only seen a fraction, and it doesn't have to break the bank. And the most important message, of course, is if you like it quiet and away from the crowds, then low season is just a wonderful time to be here. It's a great, great experience. And it's one of those where, yet again, and I have this every time I travel anywhere in the world, I always think, how much better could it be in the peak season? I can't understand how this experience could be much better, to be honest. And in fact, me being me, and I don't like crowds, and that's the reason I set up the organisation. In fact, it could only be worse if there was a lot more people here. A handful of people, you can speak to a few people, find out where they're from, nice and easy. But no, I would absolutely highly recommend Kenya in the low season in particular. and we're going to be featuring it on Low Season Traveller on the website. It's not currently there. We do feature a number of African destinations. We feature Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, Tanzania, Ethiopia, a number of destinations. We don't yet feature Kenya, however, of course we will be doing as a result of me being here on this particular trip. And we have featured a number of African destinations on the Low Season Traveller magazine. And if you haven't seen that yet, do check it out. It's a great magazine. We've got a great editor called Ryan, and some fabulous articles and contributors, including Warren Pearson, who is our Africa man. Warren, greetings to you if you're out there listening. Warren knows a huge amount about the wildlife, flora and fauna of Africa, and that's one thing that I will say I have missed while I've been here, and that's to have somebody knowledgeable who can actually tell you and help you to understand what you're experiencing, because seeing it all is one thing, but having someone with you who can really help you to understand and appreciate what you're looking at, I think that would bring it to the next level. And it really reiterates to me the value of having a really good guide with you. And do check out, Warren's got his own organisation, Safarius, which he has with a few of his colleagues. And those guys are absolutely phenomenal. Their knowledge is second to none. But yeah, if Warren was here, I'd learn a little bit more about some of the birds that are here, which are huge, and I've no idea what they are. They look like storks to me. They could be anything. I'd learn more about, the elephant, the baboons rather, about the hippo, everything else. So that's something that's missing, and I think that's worth investing in. But that's me. I hope you enjoyed this short podcast. It was just something that I wanted to put together relatively quickly while I'm still here in Kenya, and hopefully it's given you all a little bit of an understanding about, if you're listening, the sounds of Kenya and the bird life, which is just sensational. And for those of you that are looking at this on YouTube, it shows you a little bit about what you can experience, what you can see when you're here as well. So there you have it. And you can learn more about Kenya during the low season months in a forthcoming article in Low Season Traveller magazine, as well as a new guide which we'll be producing at a later date on lowseasontraveller.com. To learn more about Voi Wildlife Lodge, please visit voiwildlifelodge.com. Next time we head over to Kilifi in Kenya to visit one of the most eco-conscious properties I have ever had the pleasure of staying in, called Distant Relatives. But that's our show for this week. Thanks as always for your company. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please do leave us a positive rating and review on your podcast app. And also don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn to be the first to hear our latest low season stories, articles and guides. Have a great week wherever you are, and remember that travel is always better and fairer for the planet, the local communities and you the travellers, when it's without the crowds.